You probably won't believe what unfolded that night when my granddaughter's friend joined me by the fire. Even now, it feels surreal, like a quiet dream stitched into the fabric of my memory. Life has a strange way of nudging us during the most ordinary hours. When the rooms are hushed, the fire flickers, and a casual exchange turns into something quietly profound. Before I dive in, I'd love to know where you're listening from. What cities, what small towns, what parts of this vast, beautiful country are wrapped in this story with me? I still find it magical that words shared in one room can stretch all the way from Seattle to Savannah, across hills and highways. If this story touches you in any way, I hope you'll subscribe and leave a like. Not for the numbers, but for the warmth of connection, for the shared feeling that we're all still learning, still becoming, no matter our age. So let me bring you back to that evening. The house was wrapped in a kind of stillness that only visits after everyone else has settled in for the night. My granddaughter, Emma, had a group of her friends over for the weekend. They'd taken over the rec room, their voices rising and falling in bursts of laughter, popcorn flying, silly inside jokes spinning through the air. I'd been in the kitchen pretending to tidy up, though really I was just listening in, letting their joy echo through the quiet corners of my heart. It reminded me of when my own daughter filled this home with the same kind of youth. Eventually, their voices faded upstairs. The unmistakable thud of tired feet on carpeted steps, followed by the hushed hum of video games behind a closed door. I should have headed to bed. But something in me wandered toward the living room instead, toward the quiet glow and comfort of the fireplace. I've always found comfort there. The way the flames move, never hurried, never still. The way warmth reaches into you and rests there. I wrapped myself in the same worn blanket I've had for years and eased into the armchair that has long since molded to my shape. Then I heard footsteps. I assumed Emma had come back down for water. But instead it was her friend, Aiden, I believe his name was. He hovered in the doorway, his face softly lit by the glow of the fire. "Would it be all right if I sit with you for a bit?" he asked, voice gentle but certain. Caught me a little off guard. He had every reason to stay upstairs or slip into the guest room. But instead there he stood, uncertain yet somehow sure. I gestured toward the couch. "Of course," I said. "Couldn't sleep." He gave a faint grin and a shrug. Something like that. Fire looked nice. So he sat, not slouched, not stiff, just there, fully present, like someone who wasn't in a rush to be anywhere else. There was a calm about him, not the kind born of age, but of something else. Maybe sensitivity, maybe curiosity. We didn't talk at first. The fire filled the space between us with its slow rhythm. Shadows moved across the walls like old memories. My fingers tugged gently at the edge of my blanket. I debated speaking, but before I could, he did. "Emma talks about you all the time," he said. His voice was steady, like he wasn't fishing for anything, just offering a piece of truth. That made me smile a little nervously. "I hope it's all flattering." "Mostly," he teased. Then after a thoughtful pause he added, "She says you're the bravest person she knows." I wasn't prepared for that. It hit me with a kind of softness that still sinks deep. After a lifetime of holding others up, through grief, through joy, through everyday life, I suppose you don't expect to hear the weight of your efforts reflected back to you, let alone through the voice of someone else's grandchild. I smiled again, trying to brush off the emotion. "Oh, I don't know about brave," I said. But inside it reached me. We kept talking, slowly at first. Bits and pieces about his college, his folks back in New Mexico, things that didn't seem all that important until they were. Until they built a bridge between us, thread by thread. He asked questions, not polite ones, not filler, but the kind that show a person is genuinely listening. How long had I lived in Portland? Did I always prefer autumn? What was it like raising children in this old house? One answer always led to another, and before I knew it, I was sharing things I hadn't said out loud in years. I spoke of waiting up late for my daughter to come home during high school curfews. Of the worry that grows in a mother's chest like a second heartbeat. I told him about my husband, gone nearly 12 years now, and how we used to sit in front of this very fireplace on quiet Sunday nights, dreaming about everything we hadn't yet done. And he didn't interrupt. He didn't nod absently or check his phone. He just listened, completely, as if every word I said mattered. And somewhere in all of that, I stopped seeing him as Emma's friend. He wasn't a teenager anymore. He was simply a young man sitting with me, bridging decades with nothing but sincerity and attention. At one point he looked at me, really looked. And in his eyes something softened, some wall fell away. "Maybe that's why I came down here tonight," he said. "Didn't think about it at the time, but maybe I needed this. Someone like you. Just to talk to." His words hung in the air like soft music, unexpectedly tender and impossibly sincere. A hush fell between us, not heavy or awkward but meaningful. I felt the words settle somewhere deep, brushing past layers I usually kept guarded. Without quite thinking, I reached out and laid my hand over his. It was nothing grand, nothing bold, just a quiet moment of touch that spoke louder than anything either of us could say. He didn't flinch. He didn't retreat. Instead, he shifted slightly, just enough for our hands to rest more completely together, skin to skin, warm and steady. The fire hissed softly, throwing flecks of gold and red against the walls. In that instant, the world seemed to recede. There was only the rhythm of the flames, the closeness of our hands, and the shared wordless acknowledgement that something had taken root between us. Something small. Something profound. Eventually I pulled my hand back, not in shame, not in fear, but in reverence. As though I knew how delicate this was. And still, even with the touch gone, the warmth lingered. In my palm. In my chest. In the gentle thunder of my thoughts. When Emma came bounding in not long after, brimming with leftover stories from the night before, the moment between us vanished like mist in sunlight. We smiled. We nodded. Nothing unusual. But inside I knew better. Something had shifted. Something unnamed had begun. That night in bed, as the quiet reclaimed the house and the wind rustled gently outside my window, I lay there awake, staring at the ceiling. My skin still remembered. My heart still hummed. It had been so long since I felt this kind of aliveness, a spark not born of romance exactly, but of deep human connection. The following days carried with them a strange, bright undercurrent. It felt as though the light from that fire had crept into the corners of everything. My coffee in the morning, the way I moved through the house, the conversations we shared. I caught myself noticing him more. How he always paused before speaking. How he listened with his whole body. How his eyes softened when he looked at me. There was something unspoken dancing between us. And though we never addressed it, we both felt it. I was sure of it. One afternoon, Emma was out again. Plans with friends, errands around town. And the house fell into a familiar hush. I found myself back in the living room. This time with golden autumn sunlight streaming through the wide windows. No fire, just natural warmth, the way it lit up the floorboards like something sacred. And as if conjured by a thought, he appeared. Book in hand, expression calm, and that now familiar spark in his eyes. He settled onto the same place on the couch, the same ease in his body. "I thought I'd try reading in here today," he said, flashing a knowing half-smile. "Feels like the right spot." I smiled back, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "It does. There's something about the light in this room. It softens the world a little." He met my gaze, and again there was that quiet intensity. A kind of stillness in him that pulled me in. Not desire in the usual sense, but something deeper. A shared understanding. The kind of feeling that comes when two people recognize each other in a way most don't bother to look for. We started talking about the book he was reading, a coming-of-age story, full of quiet heartbreak and discovery. That led us to other books, stories that shaped us, authors we loved and characters we still thought about years after closing the final page. His questions were thoughtful, layered in curiosity, and as I answered I realized I was sharing more than just titles. I was offering memories, slices of myself I hadn't dusted off in ages. At one point, He gently closed his book and leaned back, his eyes following the slow drift of sunbeams across the floor. "I think I envy you," he said, voice low. I looked up, surprised. "Envy me? What for?" He hesitated, then shrugged with a shy smile. "You've seen so much, and yet, you still see the beauty in small things. I think a lot of people lose that as they get older. But not you. You still notice. You still care." His words touched something tender in me, a mix of pride and ache. I had lived through storms, grief, loss, long years of putting others first, and I knew what it was to forget to notice the light, the quiet, the beauty. But I had always come back to it eventually. I reached for my tea, taking a slow sip to steady myself. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know. I forget sometimes too. But I think noticing things, even small ones, is what keeps us human." He nodded, his eyes kind. "Exactly." We fell into silence then. The kind that's full, not empty. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. The way his hand moved along the book's spine, the slow rhythm of his breathing, the thoughtful crease in his brow. I wasn't analyzing. I wasn't daydreaming. I was simply there, present. And so was he. Later, as the shadows in the room began to stretch and the warmth dimmed to a golden hush, he shifted on the couch. Just enough to close a bit of the space between us. It was subtle, barely a movement, but I felt it. The warmth of his shoulder brushing mine. The shared breath of silence between us. My heart fluttered, not from longing, but from sheer, quiet awareness. It reminded me, life can still surprise us. And then, as if weighing the words before letting them go, he said softly, "You make this house feel bigger." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. I chuckled gently, giving my head a small shake. "I think this house has always felt big. Maybe I just needed someone to show me why." He smiled at that, soft, knowing, and for a moment the space between us filled with something invisible yet undeniably real. There was respect, certainly, but layered beneath that was a quiet understanding. An unspoken recognition that some relationships aren't bound by labels or time, but by truth. And the rare ones, those that surprise you, are better held with care than explained away. That evening, as the fireplace crackled to life once more, painting shifting shadows on the walls, a quiet realization settled over me. These kinds of moments, they don't linger forever. They're fleeting, ephemeral. You can't chase them or preserve them. You can only be inside them fully. And I was. Every word we shared, every glance that lingered a breath too long, every silence that said more than speech, I was there for all of it. What I hadn't expected was to feel parts of myself reawaken. As though a window long sealed shut had been opened, letting in air, light, life. A layer of me that had gone quiet over the years stirred again, warm and alive. By the time night fell, we sat even closer than before. Not touching, not speaking much. Our hands rested quietly in our laps, mere inches apart. Yet the space between us was filled with a kind of electricity. Not desire exactly, but presence. Respect. A shared awareness that something significant had unfolded between us. Something rooted in being seen for who we truly were. As I lay in bed that night, surrounded by the quiet breathing of the house, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. This was no passing exchange. No idle companionship. This was a moment, a rare, beautiful chapter in my life I hadn't even known I needed. And then, the final weekend of his visit arrived. There was a quiet tension that threaded its way through the walls, unspoken but unmistakable. The kind of feeling that builds when something meaningful nears its end. The house felt smaller somehow, like it had been holding its breath along with us. I spent the morning straightening up, fluffing pillows, adjusting things that didn't really need adjusting. But my mind kept returning to him. His calm voice, his thoughtful questions, the way his gaze made me feel understood without having to explain a thing. Emma was out with friends for the afternoon, which left the house silent again, except for the soft creak of old floorboards and the distant hum of a car passing outside. He entered the living room just as the sun had begun its slow descent. No announcement, just his familiar presence settling into the same spot on the couch. As though this had always been our routine. Our eyes met and he spoke, voice low. "I don't want this weekend to end." My heart gave a small twist, both aching and full. "Neither do I said quietly. "But even endings have their place. Sometimes they carry their own kind of grace." He nodded slowly. "I've learned more from you in these few days than I thought I could. About noticing things. About how to be still. About how to actually see life." The firelight bounced gently between us. "And I've been reminded," I said, "that connection has no age limit. That meaning doesn't stop arriving just because we've seen a few more winters. Sometimes life still has surprises. Good ones." We spoke after that. Not much, but with depth. Things we hadn't shared yet. Or worries. What kept us up at night. The quiet dreams we didn't say aloud very often. There was no pretense left. Only honesty. At some point he reached out, placing his hand just beside mine on the armrest. Not overlapping. Not demanding. Just there. Breath away. I let my hand hover above it, trembling slightly, aware of the weight of the moment. It wasn't a claim, it was a message. Silent one. And I heard it. The fire snapped gently. The room was full of something I couldn't name. Something delicate and deep. Youth and age seemed to blur, past and present mingling in the glow between us. What we shared wasn't about time or romance. It was about recognition. Mutual reverence. He looked at me again, his gaze steady but open, and said with a voice barely above a whisper, "You've shown me what it means to really see someone. What it means to listen with more than your ears. I'll carry that with me. Always. And I'll remember this too," I said. "All of it. It's something I'll treasure." We didn't need to speak after that. The room held our words. Held us. The silence between us wasn't absence. It was presence. A fullness that didn't require sound. And then, slowly, like the sun setting behind the blue ridge, life shifted again. Emma returned, her laughter trailing through the halls, bringing with it the normalcy of daily life. The spell didn't break, but it did fade. Like all beautiful things must. But I didn't feel sadness. What I felt was gratitude, for the quiet wonder of being truly seen, and the gentle reminder that even in the later chapters of life, there are still stories waiting to be written. And yet, even as time pushed us forward, the thread between us held firm. Unspoken but steady. Like something stitched carefully into the fabric of that weekend. Too subtle to tug, too strong to ignore. When it came time for him to go, I walked him to the door. The air outside was crisp, carrying with it the earthy scent of pine and the last hints of autumn's breath. A breeze rustled through the trees and I felt a shiver, not from cold but from the ache of parting. "Thank you," he said. His voice was even, but I could hear the undercurrent, the emotion woven into the quiet between his words. "For everything. For your time. For listening. For just being here." I smiled, though my throat tightened. Tears gathered behind my eyes, not quite falling. "Thank you for coming," I said gently. "For reminding me that life still holds surprises, even at 55. He paused like he might say something more. Then simply nodded, stepped down from the porch, and disappeared into the night. I stood there for a while, the door half open behind me, the cool air settling around my shoulders like a memory. There was a finality to it, but also something else. Not just an ending. Beginning to. A beginning of something quieter. A new awareness, a renewed belief in life's quiet, unfolding wonder. Inside, I returned to my chair by the fire. The room welcomed me back like an old friend. The flames had softened, glowing low and deep, painting the walls with their familiar, comforting light. I sat down slowly, wrapping the blanket across my lap, and let the quiet return. Not the empty kind, but the kind that hums with presence. I thought about everything. The unexpected conversations, the gentle laughter, the comfortable silences. I thought about the way we had found each other across generations, in a space built on mutual curiosity and grace. Life, I realized, still had lessons to offer, even when I thought I had seen all its shapes. Sometimes the biggest gifts arrive softly. They don't come with fanfare or noise. They arrive in the gaze of someone who truly sees you. In a shared cup of tea. In a story told under the breath of firelight. That weekend hadn't been about romance or age or even time. It had been about presence. About rediscovering parts of myself I didn't know were waiting. About being reminded, gently, that feeling deeply is not only for the young, and that being truly seen is a gift at any age. Sitting in that chair, surrounded by the hush of my home and the glow of dying embers, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace in knowing that my story hadn't ended. That new chapters didn't need to begin with loud declarations or life-changing events. Sometimes they begin with a weekend, a glance, a conversation that shifts something inside. For the first time in a long while I felt awake. Truly awake. To the magic of connection. To the beauty of being understood. To the quiet, enduring truth that respect, presence, and kindness have no expiration date. And so, as the fire dimmed and the house wrapped itself once more in silence, I let the moment settle into me. A moment not defined by drama, but by tenderness. A moment that would not vanish, even when the days returned to their ordinary rhythms. That weekend wasn't just a memory. It was a gift, and I would carry it with me, quietly, gratefully, forever.